I want to remind everybody that they said Trump was in the pocket of Putin, and we, as we pointed out on this show, and as Aaron Matei has pointed out on his show and other places, that there was just as much evidence indicating that Trump was not doing the bidding of Putin. In fact, there was more than there was evidence saying that he was. And here's another example of that, right? So there was the Nord Stream 2. Trump approved sanctions on Russia gas pipeline. So they wanted to get Russia wants to sell gas to Europe and to Germany, and so Trump put a sanction on that, right? So what is this? That's 2019, December 2019. So this is May 2021. Biden to waive sanction on the company in charge of Nord Stream 2. This is real. The Biden administration will waive sanctions on the corporate entity and CEO overseeing the construction of Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline into Germany. That's real. Boy, wow. The completion of Nord Stream 2 would be a huge geopolitical win for Putin and give him substantial new leverage in Europe. And he's already the most powerful person on the planet, right? According to the liberals like Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow. And now he's going to even have more power. This could get really scary. And Joe Biden's facilitating all this. Stunning. This is from Ted Cruz. He says, in defiance of U.S. law, Joe Biden is actively helping Putin build his pipeline. Objectively speaking, the Biden administration is shaping up to be the most pro-Russia administration in modern era. Ted Cruz is right about this. This might be the only time Ted Cruz is speaking out against pipelines. Probably the first and the last. This is it. What does Putin have on Biden? Is Robert Mueller available? This is what Aaron Matei says because he does open mics. He's very funny. The saddest part is that Biden's P tape is 11 minutes long. That's the sad part.
That's a great joke from Malcolm.
That's a really great joke.
That's a good joke.
Malcolm.
In real Russia, so then people still won't stop. So underneath your tweet, so you tweeted this out, or underneath Ted Cruz's tweet saying this, someone said, in real Russia-related news, Trump colluded with Russia, and it's all documented in the Mueller report.
Yes, that's right.
I guess it must be an invisible ink written on the last page because nobody's ever seen that stuff that documented the collusion with Russia. In fact, it was the exact opposite. The Mueller report concluded that there was no collusion between Trump, anybody in the Trump campaign, and anybody in Russia. That was the conclusion. But people still, this has got 93 likes. That got 93 likes. As Joe Biden takes off a sanction that Donald Trump put on, as Joe Biden does the bidding of Vladimir Putin, they're still saying Trump is in bed with him. I want to give you one more piece of information. Donald Trump's ambassador to Russia, he's got to be corrupt and working for Putin. Donald Trump picked him. Joe Biden kept him. Joe Biden appointed Donald Trump's ambassador to Russia. He kept him on. I don't know. I feel like a chump. I feel like someone was goofing on me for 4 fucking straight years. I feel like the whole establishment media was playing a big goof on me. Are you shitting me? The Biden administration recently decided to keep the Trump-appointed U.S. ambassador on the job in Moscow. And why did they do that? I thought that they were all compromised. Well, John Sullivan has been on the job for almost a year and a half. He was Trump's ambassador to Russia. He is viewed by the Biden administration as a steady hand. How could that possibly be? Cenk Uygur must literally be cleaning shit out of his pants right now. Rachel Maddow must be slapping on an extra long pair of eyelashes so she can fan this one out. They're keeping Trump's Russia ambassador. Let me go to Aaron Matei, who won the Independent News Award for his debunking, his meticulous debunking of the Russiagate conspiracy theory, which was evidence-free. So, Aaron, what do you say about all this? Joe Biden taking off the sanctions and Joe Biden keeping the ambassador that Donald Trump picked for Russia. What the F?
This is yet more evidence that the people who chose to believe against all the available evidence for more than 4 years now, that Russian social media bots and email hackers had the power to sow chaos and turn America against itself, and that Donald J. Trump and his campaign conspired with it secretly. These people are a part of a cult called Blue Anon.
Yes.
It's, I think, as dumb as QAnon. I don't know QAnon too well, but Blue Anon's pretty stupid. This idea that the president of the U.S. is a Russian agent and that Vladimir Putin can destroy our society with his social media bots. That sounds pretty stupid to me. But I would argue that it's more dangerous than QAnon, because QAnon was relatively fringe. I mean, a lot of people, but not the mainstream of society. Whereas Blue Anon was every single major cable news network, all the major news outlets, the major opposition party in Congress, including its leaders like Nancy Pelosi, who would say constantly as her mantra, all roads lead to Putin, and Adam Schiff, who would say that he secretly saw evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. It's dangerous because not only is it moronic, all these dumb theories that they believed, you know, about a P-tape and whatever, secret spies and the secret Russian spies, all this stuff. But it was dangerous because to justify their conspiracy theory, they had to overlook the reality of Trump's actual policies, which, if you were watching Jimmy Dore and the Gray Zone throughout this time, you could have learned that Trump was making things actually a lot more dangerous with Russia because he was surrounded by hawks and they were pursuing an extremist pro-war neocon agenda. They sold more weapons to Ukraine than Obama did. They ramped up spending on nuclear weapons. Trump tore up all these vital nuclear weapons treaties, including the INF and New START. Trump bombed Syria twice. The government of Bashar al-Assad, which is an ally of Russia. Trump launched a coup in Venezuela, another key ally of Russia. All these things were drastically making tensions worse with Russia. But the mainstream media and Democrats ignored all of this because it undermined their conspiracy theory, and also because their rhetoric was actually demanding that Trump be more confrontational with Russia. So when he actually was doing what they supposedly wanted him to do, they couldn't acknowledge it because it undermined their narrative that he really was doing Vladimir Putin's bidding. So this was an extremely dangerous cult. And the absurdity of it is captured with news like what we're seeing now, whereas Trump tried to block construction of this Nord Stream 2 pipeline, this vital project for Russia, which basically connects it to Western Europe through Germany, Biden now comes in and he is reversing that. And he is dropping the Trump effort to sanction the pipeline. He's accepting it. And that is a big victory for Russia. And I think it's a good thing because it will reduce tensions, and it means that, you know, people will get cheap energy, and it's good for everybody, I think. But the point is, it doesn't get acknowledged for the absurdity that it shows about Russiagate. Because look, if Trump did this, if Trump dropped the sanctions, he'd be called a Putin traitor and Putin's puppet and all that. When Biden does it, it just gets ignored.
100% ignored. It's like it's not even happening.
Well, I personally am withholding all judgment until I see Trump's tax return from 2008. I think I think, Aaron, you summed it up. Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly.
I would love to see if Rachel Maddow or Anderson Cooper or who else covered this in the mainstream news. I like to see, did the Young Turks cover this and say, oh, it turns out we were idiots for 5 fucking years on purpose? This is ridiculous. No, I'm going to guess they did. I'm going to guess they didn't. Nobody covered this. That would be my guess. Have you seen any coverage of this, Aaron?
I haven't. And then I just come back to the nerve of these people to make fun of QAnon. The nerve of them. They're making fun of people who believe in conspiracy theories when they promoted the most dangerous one of all, and one of the dumbest conspiracy theories in human history that I can think of, this idea that Trump is really an agent of Putin. I mean, think how dumb that was. But yet, this was the way to be accepted in mainstream media, and this was treated as something serious. And those of us who didn't go along with it, we were treated as pariahs somehow. It's funny. Like, it's, you know, unfortunately it was so dangerous for the world and everything, but comedy-wise, it's pretty funny.
You would think it. The problem is not enough people understand the premise. They just think it's most people just take Russiagate as fact because they've heard it for 5 years straight from every reliable news source that it is a fact, 100% fact. You know, I again, whenever my college roommate calls you up and he's like, "Oh, hey, have you heard about this QAnon?" I know it's just we're fucked. I mean, that he's worried. He's worried the guy's about to have his house taken away because he hasn't been able to make a living because of COVID.
Yeah.
And he was worried about QAnon.
Yeah.
I go, and you're not mad at Joe Biden and the Democrats who are not giving you COVID relief so you can pay your fucking mortgage. Go, no.
Well, and I was just going to add too, like, and Aaron, you kind of touched on this where while this whole thing was going on for 4 freaking years, which is, God, it's so crazy that it just kept going and going. But while all that was going on, they were not only ignoring what was actually going on around the world and what was actually going on in relation to Russia, but also they were ignoring everything that was going on domestically.
Absolutely.
Where all too often Trump was getting everything he wanted with his judges being fast-tracked, with cutting food stamps, his tax breaks. I mean, there's 1,000,005 reasons to dislike Donald Trump. There's 1,000,005 to dislike Joe Biden. And, you know, instead they just hyperbolize this nonsense and don't report on other things.
I'll never tire of pointing this out. There were bigger liberal protests to save the job of Jeff Beauregard Sessions, whatever his name is.
Beauregard.
Beauregard Sessions, than to oppose Trump's tax heist, one of the biggest upward transfers of wealth in U.S. history. That was the state of liberal politics, of the resistance under Trump. More concern for Jeff Sessions' job than stopping these pro-elite tax cuts. And you can go on to many other issues and make that comparison. It's so embarrassing. We let down this country, the world, and future generations by being consumed with this dumb conspiracy theory. And the funny thing is, it's still going. So I just actually had a big story today that I put out. It's on my Substack, which I just launched, which is mate.substack.com. And it's about this most recent Russiagate claim where the Treasury Department put out this press release about this guy, Konstantin Kilimnik, who was a Manafort aide. And he's one of the few people in the Trump orbit, like relatively close to the Trump campaign, who has a Russian passport. What they did with him is they basically used him to try to keep the Russiagate narrative alive, with Treasury claiming all of a sudden that he passed secret Trump polling data to Russian intelligence in 2016 and that he's actually a Russian spy. Now, this press release had no evidence whatsoever.
It was already
just
public.
One sentence saying this.
It was already public knowledge, that's polling data, correct?
Yeah. It was it was basically like him taking headlines from like Real Clear Politics, like Trump 43, Clinton 42, and sending it to Manafort's clients in Ukraine, and by the way, to U.S. officials, which is documented actually even in the Mueller report, and just saying, hey, our boy's in the race, he's doing good. And for Manafort's clients, he was trying to say, look, our boy's doing well, so maybe you want to think about doing business with me in the future because Manafort's going to be valuable. And also they were trying to get some money that was owed to them. So, but the Russiagators take this, turn this into a conspiracy theory that Kilimnik was really sharing polling data with Russian intelligence. And even though the Mueller report found no evidence of this whatsoever and plenty of evidence to contradict it, all of a sudden, 2 years later, just last month in April, the Treasury Department out of nowhere revived it. And everybody went crazy and talked about this being finally the Russiagate smoking gun. And the funny thing is that news came on the same day that the Biden administration quietly admitted that the Russian bounty story in Afghanistan was bullshit. So even though Biden just tells us, oh yeah, this big thing we were hyperventilating about for 5 months about the bounties, yeah, sorry, that's not true. This other conspiracy theory gets floated about Kilimnik and everybody seizes on it. So what I just published today is this long article where I interviewed Kilimnik and I talked to him and he points out there's no evidence for any of these claims against him. He says Mueller, the FBI, no one's ever contacted him, which is exactly what happened with Julian Assange. For some reason, this pivotal figure in Russiagate was never contacted by the investigators supposedly looking into it, which is very curious. You wonder why. And actually, he gave me evidence that undermines one of Mueller's key claims about him because, look, Mueller couldn't accuse him of being a Russian spy because he had no evidence. So what Mueller did in his report, and this is what fueled all this innuendo about Kilimnik, Mueller said that Kilimnik has these unspecified ties to Russian intelligence, which he didn't explain. And what he did to try to substantiate that is he said that among several things, Kilimnik traveled to the U.S. once on a Russian diplomatic passport. And he said, and the insinuation there is that a diplomatic passport is a cover for an intelligence officer, because intelligence officials will sometimes travel to countries under diplomatic cover. But I got Kilimnik's actual passport and visa from that period that Mueller says he was in the U.S. on a so-called diplomatic passport. And Mueller was wrong. He was here on a normal civilian passport. So Mueller got something seriously wrong, and I put that to Mueller and to Andrew Weissman, his top prosecutor. They didn't respond to me. I put it to the Justice Department and the FBI. They declined comment. But it's just one more example of these explosive Russiagate claims being used to push conspiracy theories, being undermined by the actual facts when they come out much later. And how, because we're not interested in doing journalism here, but pushing a narrative, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't penetrate the mainstream.
What people don't realize about they still think that Russia they interfered in our election. It did say that in the Mueller report. It was widespread and deep and all this shit. What they're talking about is troll farms, and at best maybe $100,000 or $200,000 spent on these troll farms at best. You know how much free media they gave to Donald Trump? $2 billion in free media. Chris Hayes would do his whole show with Trump's empty podium on a camera over his shoulder. Don't tell me that Russian trolls through this election. $2 billion in free media was given to Donald Trump, and that's what threw this election, you big fucking liars. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.